What's up? I'm Cy Hookster. This is Deep Sigh, Humor in My Adventures in Blindness. This is the show where I'm reading the posts that I write at deepsigh.net about being a blind man in New York City and beyond. Hi. Sorry this is late to the paid subscribers. Thank you so much for waiting for this to come out until I had a voice again. As you can hear, I don't have 100% of my voice back, but I figured I should get this to you sooner rather than later because I really don't know how long it'll be until I get my next, my full voice back. So for today, you're just dealing with really deep sigh. Quick housekeeping announcement. We're going to be making a bit of a change on this show, as I've already told everyone on the email list, but in case you're not reading those, we are going to be switching to doing this kind of episode every other week, meaning these written posts and the podcast episodes that accompany them will come out every other week instead of every week. And on the alternate weeks, I am going to be doing some other podcast content for you, so not written content, and that will be available to the paid subscribers only. This first upcoming week will be kind of an Ask Me Anything episode from that survey that I sent out to everyone on the email list. It will be asking, the question is about how I make the show, like how do I read an essay into a microphone as a blind person, which is a good question, and I'm going to answer it. These other bonus episodes, some of them will be other kinds of humor and comedy stuff. I will do more answering listener questions. The link to that survey will be in the show notes here if you want to get your question in. And for the free subscribers, you will still be getting these episodes and essays a month later. You'll just be getting them every other week. And if you want access to them as soon as they come out and access to those alternate week bonus podcasts, which will remain behind the paywall, please go to deepsigh.net, that's deepsy.net, and become a paid subscriber. I am doing this because the writing of the posts, which if in case you haven't noticed, I've been doing a lot of writing for this, putting out a high volume of things, and that the sheer amount has gotten a little bit in the way of my freelancer schedule, right? In my regular life, I do lots of writing and editing and podcasting and other stuff as a freelancer, and my schedule has not accommodated how much I am doing for Deep Sigh. I so appreciate everyone who has signed up as a paid subscriber. You allow me to continue doing this, and this is just part of my continuing quest to make this whole thing sustainable while still bringing you content every week that I think, based on your feedback, you will still very much enjoy. All right, I got through all that, I think, as quickly as I could without leaving anything out. So I'm now going to go into the actual essay for today, which is called Unsolicited Sighted Helpers, the 6 Most Common Types and How to Deal with Them. My methods are effective. Only one ever told me to go die. Blind people, you know how it is. You're walking along somewhere in public. You know exactly where you are and where you're going. You're minding your own business, and along comes a sighted person who is 100% certain you are in dire need of their help getting somewhere. What do? By which I, of course, mean, how do you get rid of them? I've been the target of these people for almost 20 years, ever since I first used a white cane. I have a lot of stories and wisdom to share. This is my guide to the 6 most common types of unsolicited sighted helpers: the simple question asker, the random information provider, the distance shooter, the clinger, the grabber, and the panic screamer. The provision of unrequested help is endless, and therefore, so is the threat of it coming at any moment. The information is useless, the assumptions are condescending, and the whole thing is exhausting. So I'm going to tell you how I deal with these 6 types efficiently, while also trying to have a good time along the way because we deserve that. Hopefully, this will provide a jumping off point for your own ideas about how you might respond to these unwelcome intruders. 1. The simple question asker. Let's start with the most basic type, the person who just walks up and asks if you need help finding something. Many times a brief, "no thanks," will do the trick. But for whatever reason, many sighted people seem uncomfortable directly asking whether you need help or asserting that they believe they can provide that help. Their questions when they approach you will beat around the bush. "Which way are you headed, sir?" I give them a small smile and say, "This way," pointing straight ahead in the direction I'm walking. They usually either leave or continue the conversation knowing that there's a possibility of me messing with them a little. A lot of people chuckle at themselves. If they do, I know I may have just met a teachable new friend. Another variant. Just after law school, I worked in Lower Manhattan. Every day I walked from a subway station down the street to where the courthouses are. I wore a suit, carried a briefcase, and walked among many other besuited briefcase carriers. Occasionally, one of them would ask me, "Where are you going, sir?" The answer, "Work. Where are you going?" Again, fun people will get it and laugh at themselves. Maybe even join the joke, saying, "Me too. What are the odds?" I give myself full permission to let everyone who isn't fun go on their confused and/or annoyed way. They'll be fine. The idea is this: if they don't directly ask whether I want them to help me get somewhere, I directly answer whatever evasive question they asked instead. Since we both know what they were actually asking, my unexpected answer provides an opportunity for them to reflect on their discomfort, and my readiness to engage in some light verbal jousting can clue them in that I'm not really in need. Some hypothetical examples. Q. How can I help? A. That depends. What would you say are your strongest skills? Q. What are you looking for, sir? A. Oh, I can't actually look for things. You see, I'm blind. That's why I have this cane. Q. What do you need, boss? A. Suddenly emotional. Now that you ask, I think the honest answer is love. 2. The random information provider. This is a person, usually a man, who, with no prelude, spontaneously says directional information at me as they walk by. Something like, you just crossed 93rd Street and you're headed downtown on Broadway. Truthfully, I just thank these people politely and move on. They tend to stop bothering me after that since, I assume, they believe they have done their good deed for the day. But I do spend the next block or so thinking about that person's assumptions. They thought it was possible I was nonchalantly strolling along down the sidewalk, knowing neither what street I was on nor which direction I was going, and I was not bothering to find out. Maybe I was crossing my fingers and hoping I ended up in a pleasant destination. So for those a little braver than me, next time you encounter a random information provider, maybe try this strategy I thought of years ago but never implemented. Act as uninformed as they assume you are. Sighted person. You just crossed 93rd Street and you're heading downtown on Broadway. Me. Broadway? Oh no! What happened to First Avenue? Sighted person. Sir, First Avenue is all the way on the other side of Manhattan. Me. Manhattan? Oh no! Sighted person, sounding very worried now. Where did you think you were? The Bronx? Me, panicking. Philadelphia! That's where I was this morning. How did I miss New Jersey? Hopefully at this point they will take the hint and leave. 3. The distance shooter. This type is similar to the random information provider. The differences are they shout at me from far away, and they provide both random directional information and specific instructions about what I should do next. I can ignore this type or give them a wave to let them know I heard them, but often they are persistent. They are the type most dedicated to the notion that they have information I need immediately, which is why they're yelling at me in the first place. On the walk from the subway to the courthouses I mentioned earlier, there was one particular crosswalk where a crossing guard stationed there for children heading to school yelled at me on a regular basis. I always approached the crosswalk from the opposite end of where she stood. Starting when I was about 20 or 30 feet from the street, I would hear her yelling at the top of her lungs from across 2 lanes of New York City rush hour traffic. Stop! You're at the street! The light is red! You need to stop! Or something similar. Most days I turned and crossed in the other direction, a direction I had to go eventually anyway, to avoid interacting with her further. But there was one morning when, for whatever reason, I decided enough was enough. I approached the crosswalk. She started yelling, but I did not turn. I stood at the corner in a little crowd of 8 or 10 other commuters waiting to cross until she finished. Then I put my white cane under my arm, cupped my hands over my mouth, and in a very polite, almost deferential tone, bellowed back across the street. Hey, would it be all right if you stopped screaming at me every morning? I don't like it very much when people scream at me. And it isn't very helpful because I already know this crosswalk is here. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd really appreciate it if you stopped screaming at me. There was no response. People around me chuckled appreciatively. The light changed, and we crossed. I must have passed right by her, but I don't know because she didn't say anything. I never heard a word from her again. You can also build up community defenses against distance shooters, at least in the places you frequent. Recently, when I was walking just outside the bodega around the corner from my building, there was a delivery bike parked in my path. I knew it was a bike because I hit its wheel with my white cane and felt the cane's tip xylophoning along the spokes. Just then, a woman from about 50 feet back yelled to warn me about the bike. As I started moving around it, she yelled again, but not at me this time, at the guys sitting outside the bodega. These were the guys who are always sitting outside the bodega. I know them, a couple by name. They have offered me help countless times. but I've declined enough and they've seen me navigating the neighborhood enough that they don't ask much anymore. The woman shouted they should help me get around the bike. Still a few dozen feet away from her, one of the guys yelled back, "He will tell me he doesn't need help." "What?" she yelled back. "He will dead-ass tell me he doesn't need any help," he repeated, louder this time, frustrated he was being yelled at for something he knew he couldn't do anything about. "He sure will," laughed another one of the guys to himself. I laughed too and gave them a thumbs up. The woman stopped yelling about the bike. 4. The clinger. This is the type who starts giving me instructions as they walk next to me in the same direction. Then they decide, since we are walking together anyway, they are going to stick with me and provide a constant stream of unhelpful thoughts and suggestions. These are perhaps the most stressful kind of unsolicited helper, the screamers below notwithstanding, because I have to be on constant alert. Anything I do that they perceive as a mistake will serve as further justification for staying with me. I recently walked about 2 blocks with a particularly insistent clinger. When I finally convinced her to leave me alone, I was so flustered that I forgot I was at an intersection near my house that, unfathomably, has only one curb cut directly on the sidewalk's corner instead of the usual 2, one at the end of either crosswalk. As soon as I turned to leave the clinger, I felt the curb cut, thought the crosswalk was directly ahead of me, and began walking straight into the middle of the intersection. It was going to be truly impossible to get rid of her after that. So after we crossed the street, I lied and said I was turning. I waited 20 seconds or so around the corner, then stepped back out, presumably well behind her now, and carried on my way. The thing to know about clingers is they only help if it's convenient. I know from experience that they will leave you the second your paths separate. Set aside for the moment that this means they either, 1, know the information they provide isn't that useful, which is why they are comfortable leaving you, or 2, think they're actually helping and they're choosing to abandon a disabled person who could really use their assistance. I like to just say something really vague like, "Oh, wait, stop walking," and pull out my phone. If they say anything, I respond distractedly while still looking at my phone. I want them to think I'm doing something important or urgent that I don't want questions about. Then they have to decide how long they want to wait without having idea how long I might be. They typically leave within 5 to 10 seconds. The only time this maneuver gets tricky is if I have a specific subtype of the clinger, the lurker. Lurkers walk alongside me without saying anything and only speak up every minute or so before continuing along in silence. I never know if they're still around, but I just give it an extra 15 seconds of pretending to use my phone to be safe. If I was ever unsure after that, I might fake a phone call about a creepy person who's following me and say casually, "I think they're gone, but if they come back, I do have that bottle of mace." 5. The grabber. The name is self-explanatory. They're the type who walk up to me and put their hand on my arm, shoulder, or back without overture, often without saying any words at all. Their assumption is, I guess, that everyone agrees I am in such desperate need of a sighted person's immediate assistance that they can grab me, I will accept being grabbed, and nobody around will think twice about someone grabbing a disabled stranger. As their defining behavior suggests, grabbers are the quickest of the unsolicited helpers to abandon social norms during interactions with disabled people. So unfortunately, they require the most direct approach. I've done the following multiple times. A. When grabbed, stop walking. Because the grabber is attached to me, they will also stop. B. Firmly take their hand with my free hand and remove it from my arm. C. Once their hand is off my arm, let go. If it returns to the arm, repeat step B. D. Ask pointedly, "May I help you?" E. When they explain they were trying to help, state clearly that a desire to help a stranger does not justify grabbing the stranger without asking. F. If they continue insisting they were justified in grabbing you, ask who raised them. I've never had to get this far in the process, but the contingency plan is there. Unfortunately, with grabbers, anything less than this amount of explicitness can prove ineffective, and the only alternative when I don't feel like being this confrontational is being dragged around for a while. Unless, of course, I ever get to the point where I've really just had it, and a grabber is the last straw. In that case, I suppose I could reach up and grab their face, and then when they object, ask sarcastically, "Oh, sorry, is there something wrong with grabbing strangers?" I wouldn't advise this, but I wouldn't judge you if you went for it. 6. The panic screamer. This is the type who thinks you are in such immediate danger of serious bodily injury or death that they must scream a warning at you. At many subway stops, there is a very narrow walkway between the staircases and the edge of the platform. 1 or 2 steps in the wrong direction, and you're falling on the tracks. After I carefully walked these once or twice, I found they were no problem to navigate with a cane. I've now walked them for almost 20 years without incident. About 15 years ago, a woman saw me going to walk that narrow section and decided I was about to die. "You can't walk there!" she cried. I kept walking. "Stop! You're going to get hurt!" I kept walking. "Sir, stop right now! You can't do that!" I kept walking. At this point, I was past the stairs. I turned my head and simply raised my eyebrows at her. After the last of the woman's screams stopped echoing around the station, she made no further sounds that I could hear. My strategy with panic screamers is to calmly keep doing what I'm doing. Within a few seconds, it should become clear that I am not in the danger they believe I am, and their screaming naturally flames out. Once they cannot deny I am perfectly safe, the silence will quietly confront them with the fact that they have just been shouting at someone in public for no reason. I must emphasize the importance of letting the screaming run its course rather than trying to quell it. Panic screamers do not take kindly to anything but the softest, gentlest suggestions that they might want to reconsider what they are doing. They have, after all, just done something quite loud and embarrassing in public. This was something I unfortunately did not understand when I was younger and less emotionally regulated. One night I went to cross one of the larger avenues in Manhattan. As I approached the crosswalk, a man yelled from a short distance, more aggressively than the average panic screamer, that the light was about to turn red and I shouldn't go. "Okay, thank you," I yelled back stiflingly before he had finished. "I'm fine." I reached the crosswalk. At this point in my life, I still had enough vision to clearly see headlights when it was dark, even from a distance. There were 4 lanes to traverse. The cars waiting at the light in the first 2 lanes were across the intersection from me, meaning if I started walking and the light turned in the first couple steps, I could just back up to the sidewalk in plenty of time. But if they didn't start moving for a couple seconds, I would easily get past their lanes before they crossed my path. The second 2 lanes were empty with no headlights for as far as I could see into the distance. Ever the impatient New York pedestrian, I started walking. The cars didn't start moving until I was across the first lane, giving me more than enough time to get to the middle of the road. There were still no cars coming in the other direction. I was in the clear. But then I heard the panickiest scream of my life. "No! Stop!" It was the guy who yelled earlier. I reached the road's center line and turned around to see what was happening. There, in the center of the 2 lanes behind me, was something I never would have imagined before it happened. A figure, silhouetted against the headlights, stood, legs spread wide, arms waving wildly in the air over its head. It was the panic screamer, but he wasn't screaming at me. He was screaming at the cars. He was trying to stop traffic. I watched as the progress of the headlights slowed and the sounds of engines died down. I was frozen to the spot, completely at a loss for how to respond to this behavior. Then he marched over to where I was, which I must again emphasize was completely out of the way of any cars, but still in the middle of a road. "I told you to stop!" he screamed, no more quietly than he did at the cars, even though he was now only feet away from me. This was too much. I didn't think. I just matched his energy. "Will you shut up? You're not helping." "Fine," he shrieked. "Just go fucking die!" Then he did a 180 and marched straight back across the 2 lanes of traffic that he had just stopped, angrily ranting to himself about me. I couldn't hear what he said. Dazed, I turned around slowly and crossed the remaining 2 lanes, which were still empty. So yeah, don't escalate with these people. Conclusion. Well, blind reader, I hope I've provided some food for thought as you come up with your own plan for responding to each type of unsolicited helper. Either that or you're thinking, "Sai, your approach to sighted people is consistently absurd and I would never do half these things in a million years." To that I say, fair. Totally fair. But the next time you're being dragged around by a grabber, just remember what I said. That face is right there. All you have to do is reach out your hand. Thank you all so very much for being here this week. Again, go to deepsy.net to become a paid subscriber, support what I'm doing here, get all these posts and podcasts as soon as they come out instead of a month later, and now get the alternate week bonus episodes that I will be doing, starting with the how I read essays into a microphone for a podcast as a blind person, which will be coming like probably sometime later today if you're the paid subscriber, because this came so late. Again, thank you for being patient with me. All right, everybody, that's it for this week. Have a great week. Goodbye.